Many people have made short films using Unreal, small teams of generalists working together, but what we did is different. We set ourselves a very different challenge, and that was to get multiple teams of different disciplines, different crafts, to be able to work together coherently and at scale.
We want to see if we could take that and marry it with what Unreal and real-time engines have to offer, which is very rapid iteration speed, novel ways of collaborating between artists, and interactivity at every stage of the pipeline.
And then we are fusing that with the rigour of the 4 decades plus of visual effects experience that we have.
Flight is a short film. It's set in London in 2053, and it has some really complex sequences and techniques in it. It's largely a computer-generated film using Unreal Engine.
And Fuse is the tool set and pipeline and workflow that we put in place in order to allow us to do that.
The most important thing that Fuse allows is empowering artists to be able to work in the way that they're used to in visual effects.
And it's taken decades for the world of traditional visual effects to get to a point where you can have all of those different crafts and skills working together. We wanted to build a system where you could still bring those crafts and skills and that amount of productivity together, but using Unreal as a hub instead. At Framestore, going back many, many years, we've always been at the forefront of innovation.
And as is often the way with innovation, it relies on collaboration. And we were very fortunate to have a great collaborator in Epic. They really helped us define and push these tools to the next level.
We've always found that the best tools for artists are designed by artists, and so the symbiosis of Fuse and Flight was kind of critical to that success.
To be working on the two together made both of them very challenging. Building a pipeline to service a film that's already going on is not easy, and working on a film where the pipeline is slowly being assembled as you go is not easy. But what we're building with Fuse is genuinely useful tools, crafted in the heat of a real project, crafted whilst making an actual film.
So in traditional visual effects post-production work, you tend to have a relatively linear pipeline. You tend to have one department doing their work and handing that on to downstream departments. On Fuse, we worked in a much more parallel way, showing assets at every stage. Previs flowed straight into Anim, TechViz was driven live from the Previs with updates passing directly from one to the other. The pre-light was done on the Previs scenes and then taken directly onto the LED stage to light the live action, so that after the shoot, the two slotted seamlessly together. Final asset builds started on day one and were utilised by every department. What this parallel workflow allowed us to do was to make fully informed decisions earlier in the process. We could also keep various departments open longer, so we were able to make production design decisions and animation changes up until a matter of weeks or even days before final delivery.
It gives you a lot of flexibility in when you can make decisions, and with a lot more context for those decisions. There are of course some limitations, not everything can be changed at any time, and you do need to impose some discipline on yourself, even if later changes are easier than normal. But the important thing is that the deadlines become a conscious choice and not a frustrating necessity.
I think one of the areas we did find that the engine was very powerful was in allowing artists to see their work in the broader context. It was much easier for an artist who was working in animation to be able to see what their work looked like with final lighting, with final assets. And equally, the asset artists were able to very quickly see, what does my asset look like from the final shot camera.
It enabled us to, in Previs, to understand what the film was going to be. It enabled the actors to understand the environment they were acting and understand the action. It enabled us, whilst we were filming, to see what those shots were going to be like. It made it very clear to me how much harder it is to make decisions on, say, animation, when you're not seeing it in context, when you're not seeing all the elements that are around it, you're not seeing the correct lighting. I mean, you're not seeing the face giving the right performance. So many things influence your response to a shot, and without seeing them all together, it's much, much harder to make the right decisions.
The first thing that we wanted to tackle is having a robust versioning system inside of the engine and be the core ethos of our system.
So in order to produce large-scale narrative content, you need a lot of control over what goes into each shot, and you need to be able to lock certain shots at certain statuses depending on when they get creative approval.
We built on top of Unreal to allow for that, basically to be able to track any approved version or any version of any specific shot and go back to exactly that state when that shot was approved. For example, we built London in different stages of flooding that we could swap easily in real time on a shot-by-shot basis.
The complexity of the project required multiple different versions of each asset. So a very lightweight asset for playback on the LED volume, a mid-res asset for previs and for animation, and then a high-resolution asset including cloth simulation and hair simulation for final rendering.
What we've achieved with Fuse is not only be able to see the latest, but be able to see any version and compare them in real time. The biggest kind of challenge that game engines have is being able to have multiple concurrent versions at the same time live in the engine and being able to switch between them to make decisions.
And that is the revolution. You cannot do that currently with the standard toolset in Unreal.
What it has given us is the capability of iterating at a speed that is not seen in visual effects.
Fuse allows us to change everything in real time. That's it, right? You change the lighting, changes in real time. We can change the whole environment to a different version with one click. We can change the light, compare versions, or do color correction.
And it meant that in the very early stages, we were seeing what was in Tim's head.
I could make a comment on a piece of animation and see it turned around and changed, and see it lit and rendered and composited with the live action and all brought together before the end of the review, and that's transformative to the process.
These real-time techniques are already useful in pre-production, in virtual production.
And we used all the benefits in this phase with Framestore's Farsight tool for virtual scouting, virtual camera, and virtual review sessions with more direct feedback. But I think where real time is most beneficial in filmmaking, it's in the early stages. It's no coincidence that it's being used for previs already. Fuse enabled us to take advantage of all that and invest more time into the previs because you're not throwing it away and starting again.
For Flight, we had a very technically complex shoot. We had an LED volume, we had motion control, we had motion capture, and we only actually had 4 days to shoot. So we needed to be able to hit the ground running, shoot very efficiently and fast, and so TechViz was really the key to achieving that. And having that in-engine was very powerful because all the updates that were happening through previs and through pre-lighting could flow immediately into the TechViz without any barrier in between.
Unreal doesn't have that capability, and we built it, works amazingly well and allowed us to do the shoot.
Alongside that, we knew we would need the ability to change the timing of those action sequences based on the performance of the actor. Tim was very keen that the actor drive the timing rather than the other way around. So we had the ability on the stage to be able to retime the moves dependent on the actor's performance. So we were able to do that live with a timing wheel on the stage. And then alongside that, we're able to use the previs and the pre-light and have that directly reflected on the LED volume, and therefore have our live action lighting so seamlessly match our virtual world. And then also to have that live composites on the set where we could see the motion capture being streamed in and the face being composited over the virtual character in the virtual world.
In a way that I could genuinely judge the shot, and you could get the emotional impact of how that shot was going to work.
It allowed us to move very quickly and with great confidence that what we were getting was correct. So one thing that was slightly unusual about Flight compared to other projects done in Unreal is that we were working with live action plates. Therefore we needed to employ compositing. Now compositing is not something that's well supported out of native Unreal. We had to add in a lot of technology and tools to support this. In order for our VFX compositors to work in ways that were familiar with them, we needed to split our complex scenes into multiple layers. Human faces are the hardest things to do in CG. Even with almost limitless time and large budgets, they're incredibly difficult to pull off. What the approach on Flight allowed us to do was to utilise the actors' facial performances directly and embed them seamlessly into a fully CG environment for a fraction of the cost.
It would have been impossible to create something that complex, both because of the degree of CG, the limited short film budget, the complexity of some of the shots and the long shots and the material and the action sequences. Fuse made that possible.
So this method of filmmaking isn't suitable for every type of film.
But what it is very suitable for is where you want detailed, layered, nuanced human performances, but in a situation that would be hard or even impossible to film using traditional techniques. You can get real performances in an unreal world.
And there are other types of film that can benefit too. The Fuse ecosystem was designed to be modular, so suitable for a wide range of films, and we're using some parts of it already here on current projects.
Beyond what we've developed, we've also learned a huge amount, and we know what works and what doesn't work. And if you put what we've learned and the full set of new tools together, you have something where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. It enables us to tell stories that otherwise couldn't be told. And we can apply that to future projects, and we can apply that to development of more tools and building up more capabilities and taking the next step forwards.